Okay, more mailbag. And this is the first one for this segment. And this is in response to the Roland D-05, how to update firmware I did in 2.17, in Talent 2.17. Now, I have to be honest and say, I'm not using my D-05 as much as I thought I was going to be using it. Not really sure. I tend to use the D50, so the idea of the D-05 was it was portable and it could be here. And it is just over there. There you go, there's my D-05. Right, well, just there you go. So that was kind of the idea behind it. But when I'm working in the studio, I tend to use the D50, so... and he writes, except my D-05 does not appear as any kind of drive in Windows 10. Now, you know, the problem with trying to diagnose a problem over the channel is it's, you know, there's, especially with software drivers and computers, it can be a number of things that can be causing the problem you're experiencing, grid sleep. So, here is some things to try. First, when you put the unit into receive mode or update mode, is it connected to the computer? Because if it's not connected to the computer, if you connect it to the computer afterwards, it's possible that the computer is not seeing the signal that says I'm a hard drive, and therefore is not presenting you with the hard drive. So first thing is, when you put it into update mode, you should always make sure that the USB is plugged in prior to doing that. The next thing, and this really sounds quite daft, I have no idea why this works, but I find that, especially on the Windows machine, on the Windows 10 machine, on the left hand side I have USB 2 ports, and on the right hand side, as I look at it, I have USB 3 ports. So they have separate USB buses. And I get 2 ports on either side of the machine, like that. And what I find is if something doesn't work on one side, if I move it to the other side of the machine, it invariably works. I have no idea why, but that's what I experience. So my next piece of advice is try changing the port, especially if you're running a machine that has USB 2 spec and USB 3 spec, because they will be running on separate USB bus hardware. So it's possible there is something mismatch going on. Give that a go. The third, and this is a gotcha that gets a lot of people. When Microsoft designed Windows 10, what they did is they went to all the manufacturers that were making drivers or making peripherals for a Windows machine and said, give us your drivers, or register your drivers in this big database that we're going to create, and therefore you don't have to publish the drivers separately. Our machines will come to the internet and grab the drivers. Okay, that was what happened with Windows 10. It was this sort of big central store for all the drivers. It also meant that Microsoft could test and verify the drivers before they loaded them and released them. Okay, so there was an alternative motive here. Now, it is possible that when you set your machine up, or whoever set your machine up, and I don't know whether it was you or somebody else, there is an option when you go through the setup or go through the after setup process where you can disable this automatic driver update feature. It is a user disableable or a machine disableable function. Okay, and you may inadvertently have disabled it, which means that your machine will not go off the internet and grab the drivers from this Microsoft database that's been created. Now, the horses, I'm sort of in two minds about this whole area in terms of is it secure? Well, the answer is it is about as secure as you're going to get. Okay, so I've left mine on my machine, and I just make sure that I've got really good antivirus and anti-malware software running on the machine to detect dodgy packets coming down. So that's the way I deal with this. Other people have taken the approach of I'm not giving any data to Microsoft and switched all that stuff off. So that would be my next protocol. Have you got the right drivers installed on your machine to deal with the D-05? And if the answer is I'm not sure. It might be worthwhile going to the Roland website and grabbing the drivers from there and loading those onto your Windows 10 machine and then trying the process again. Okay, the next one is from JGH548, and this was in response to a Sunday morning rant I did when the M1 turned 30, which was nearly a year ago. So, well, actually, it was a year ago, so the M1 is now 31. So, he writes, I love my M1. Its limited polyphony is a pain, but there is just something about it. It has a sound of its own. I also have a Kronos and a D50. The Roland is something else. Remarkable instrument, but the M1 is great. I couldn't agree more. It's the reason why I have a D50. It's the reason why I actually have two M1s. It's the reason why I have this beast here as well, the T1. They are endearing instruments, is the way I'd put it. I love my M1. My M1 sits in my rack in the studio above my Kronos. The Kronos sits there at playing height. The M1 is about there. And I always find my fingers wandering up to the M1 to do something, to try things out. It does have a sound of its own, and it's something that quite often I will use the M1 over another keyboard, similar to the reason why I will use a D50 over another keyboard for doing certain things. They have an intrinsic sound to them, and you know, this D-05 that I have here, you know, I can't knock that. That is a fantastic piece of retro analog to digital circuitry engineering. It sounds very, very much like the original D50, but you don't get the feel for playing the keyboard of the D50 when you play that, because you have to supply the MIDI or the notes into it from somewhere else. So I completely agree with you. Occupies a special place in my setup as well. The next one comes from Michael Walls. Now, I did actually have to read this twice because my boss is called Michael Wallace. And I was sort of like going, what's my boss doing on my YouTube channel? And this was in response to the Roland MX-1, the USB ports explained video I did some time ago. And it says, hi, Tech Guy UK, thanks for the overview of the USB inputs on the MX-1. I'm considering purchasing an MX-1 since I own a couple of boutique modules, which I use alongside an audio MIDI interface into Logic Pro X. However, before splashing out on the MX-1, there are a few things I need cleared up, and hopefully you're the bloke for the job. In my music production, I record live vocals via the interface into Logic Pro. Presently, the interface is connected directly to my Mac, but it would be great, if possible, to insert the interface into the MX-1. Another query. If I only have a controller keyboard for playing sounds in Logic and on my boutiques, can I also insert that into the MX-1? Finally, how well does the MX-1 operate with Logic Pro X? Can you do a final mix for mastering using them together? All the best. And thanks again for your informative video, Mycotron, I think that's how you pronounce it. As I said before, I am the world's most useless person at pronouncing people's names. But I will answer the questions as they've been presented back. So, the first one, the way that Roland have implemented USB on the MX-1, which is actually funny enough, just sitting just off screen there, it's whiling away. It's a bit of a weird thing what they've done here. So effectively the MX-1 has to have drivers loaded onto a target computer, and then it will present audio channels and distribute MIDI to the instruments you plug into the USB ports on this mixer. Now, the problem is that there seems to be some sort of proprietary interface going on the MX-1, in that for it to recognise a device, Roland have typically had to patch it. So they've issued a patch to put onto the MX-1 that says, we've just introduced the System 8 for argument's sake. Okay, and then the MX-1 will see the system out and it'll be able to deal with it, and it'll be able to present its audio, you'll be able to play its audio through it, and it'll be able to pass through the USB information from the MX-1 through to your computer. But that seems to be the way that Roland have done the interface out to the instrument, and then obviously the MX-1 just passes through whatever information to your computer. Now, if I'm not saying an external interface will not work with the USB ports here, but my experience to date has been that it doesn't do it very well. Now, what Roland did was they've obviously included some code in the last patch that was released for the boutiques, because the boutiques do seem to work through it. So I suspect what they've done is they've got some sort of universal logic in terms of how the boutiques present themselves to the MX-1 or to a computer, and they've effectively just taken that and stuck it in there, so all the boutiques tend to work. But when new keyboards came out, so for argument's sake, when the System 8 or the Jupiter came out, or the Juno DI, Roland actually had to issue patches for the MX-1 to make the MX-1 actually understand them and play the sounds that was coming off the USB channels. So, pound to a penny, I think a non-Roland device is probably not going to work for you plugged into the back of the MX-1. The next thing I would say about the keyboard controller, if it's a USB keyboard controller, it's unlikely it's going to work correctly plugged into the back of the MS-1. What I would do with the USB keyboard controller is I probably would plug it directly into the Mac and then send the signals from the Mac out. That would probably be the architecture I would take with that. If it's a MIDI controller, as in true MIDI, it doesn't have USB, then you probably need to get your MIDI architecture set up, but I suspect it's probably a USB controller, and then you would use it that way. And the final question, I think what a lot of people do is misunderstand what the MX-1 is. The MX-1 is really designed for live working or prototyping type activities. So if you want to play around with a sound or a riff or something like that, and you want to do it live, the MX-1 is brilliant for that sort of thing. It's brilliant for having the bass beat come through, a drum machine, some sort of arpeggiation coming off this, and playing around with all that sort of stuff. The MX-1 is brilliant for that. Very, very good for that. What it's not so good at is being used as a surface control. Now, I tried with Ableton to use this as a surface control, and it annoyed the hell out of me, to the point that I just gave up in the end, because I didn't think it was actually adding anything to my workflow by doing it that way. So I really just use it as a mixer now. I have the computer plugged into it, and I use it for running mixes in and out and just playing around with stuff. I don't use it as a surface controller. It can be used as a surface controller. You can map faders to faders in Logic Pro X. That facility does exist, but to be honest, if you were going to drop $500 on an MX-1, there are better surface controllers out there that would probably be more suited to your Logic Pro X environment. Remember, hit that like button if you like what you saw. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified about more rants, more mailbag, more questions and answers, and more videos about this sort of stuff when it's loaded to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.